Imagine opening your inbox, right? And there it is. A spam email. Looks totally ordinary, maybe even unsolicited. It promises to reveal the root of money. Now, usually you'd just delete that, wouldn't you? But what if that email, that simple kind of baited question, actually opened up this huge, profound reckoning on, well, everything: capitalism, empire, philosophy itself. So today we're taking a deep dive into a really, really fascinating response to that exact question. We'll be looking at how one author sort of unpacks the complex, often hidden forces behind our global financial systems, and in doing so challenges some very long-held beliefs about money and morality. Our source material for this is quite powerful. It's a Substack essay, and it directly takes on the ideas in Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged and also the modern push by groups like the Atlas Society.
Yeah, and our mission today really is to explore these contrasting views on money, not just, what it is, but where it genuinely comes from and what it's supposed to represent in society. We'll get into the historical, the social critiques that are leveled against the dominant financial systems, and then maybe most importantly, consider what an alternative vision of value might actually look like, all through the lens of this very personal, very critical essay we've been reading. So yeah, get ready to maybe rethink some pretty fundamental assumptions about value itself.
Okay, so this deep dive kicks off like a lot of interesting stories, kind of unexpectedly.
Yeah.
In the author's email inbox, they talk about getting this fundraising email, you mentioned it, from the Atlas Society. And initially, they just dismissed it as ideological spam, straight to the trash folder. But then something caught their eye, a specific phrase, this baited question that sort of pulled them in. And the question was, but have they ever asked themselves, what is the root of money?
Yeah.
That's really where this whole thing starts to unfold, isn't it?
It is. And that question, of course, it's not accidental. It's a direct echo from Atlas Shrugged, from that iconic money speech. It's delivered by the character Francisco d'Anconia. The essay points out the core ideas Rand presents there. Money as the, quote, highest moral expression of man's genius. Also the fruit of virtue and, capitalism itself framed as this great liberation.
Right. And the Atlas Society email then takes that philosophy and runs with it. It uses it to ask for donations for what they're calling moral capitalism.
Yeah.
Apparently even funding things like animated videos and comic book objectivism, which, objectivism is Rand's whole philosophy about rational self-interest. And this is all aimed, they say, at teaching the rising generation these specific ideas.
Mm-hmm. And the author then shares a bit about their own past with Rand's work, saying they devoured it, in that first fevered bloom of literacy, found it really sharp, sweeping, seductive. But, and this is key, they also say they ultimately rejected it. Her words, they explain, just could not contain the values I already knew, even if maybe they couldn't quite name those values back then.
Yeah, that resonates. I think a lot of people have that kind of journey, right? An early fascination that shifts over time. But what's really striking here is how the author decides to respond to this email, to this philosophy. They don't just, fire off an angry reply or delete it.
No, not at all. Instead, they imagine being right there in the room with Francisco d'Anconia, letting him give his entire speech, the whole thing, no interruptions. And then the author imagines themselves rising, not for a debate, not for a simple counterpoint, but for a reckoning.
A reckoning. That's such a strong word choice, isn't it? Why do you think they chose reckoning over, say, debate?
Well, a debate often implies, two sides may be on somewhat equal footing, looking for flaws in the other's argument. But reckoning suggests something deeper, like a fundamental calling to account, a challenge to the very legitimacy, the very foundation of the ideas being presented. It implies one side's premises might be fundamentally flawed.
Okay, so it's setting up a much more profound challenge. So how does this reckoning begin? What's the first point the author makes?
It starts right at the heart of Rand's argument, challenging that idea of money being like virtue made tangible. The author says something like, you speak of money as if it were virtue incarnate, as if gold has memory, paper has ethics, and capital is handed out according to merit, like blessings from a just God. It immediately sets up this alternative view of where money actually comes from.
And that alternative view, it just completely flips Rand's narrative on its head. The author argues that basically that's never been how money works, not in the way Rand describes it. Instead, the essay claims the dollar, for instance, isn't just the result of honest work and trade.
No, it's presented much more starkly as the outcome of war, of conquests, of oil deals struck with despots, of gold extracted from the bones of colonized peoples and stored in vaults oceans away from those who mined it.
Wow. Yeah, the source definitely doesn't pull any punches there.
Yeah.
It goes on to assert that the entire financial system from this critical perspective is essentially a structure of looting,
Looting of land, of labor, of lineage. It's a very broad and damning indictment.
That's incredibly strong language, calling the whole system looting. How does the author back that up? Do they give concrete examples?
They do. Very specific ones, actually. They bring up the case of West African nations and the CFA franc. Now, for listeners maybe not familiar, the CFA franc is this currency used in, I think, 14 African countries. But it's controversially tied to France, even printed in Paris. And the author points out that it's supposedly backed by the African nation's own stolen reserves, with France demanding they deposit, what, half their wealth in French coffers?
Half their wealth.
Yeah. And the author then directly asks the reader, asks you, is that what you mean by value for value? It's very pointed.
That example alone is pretty jarring. And then the essay brings up another really controversial case, Muammar Gaddafi.
Yeah.
And his plan for a gold-backed currency for Africa.
Exactly, the gold-backed dinar. And the essay frames this not as just, some minor economic plan, but as a potential continent-wide break from the tyranny of the dollar, the euro, and the World Bank, a real bid for financial independence. And the author then explicitly links Libya being, quote, bombed into blood and rubble to this move, framing it as the price paid for daring to step outside the empire's ledger. It certainly presents a perspective that questions the neutrality of global finance.
And the critique extends beyond just money's origins, doesn't it? It goes into the very idea of production.
Right. It challenges that Randian ideal of the heroic individual producer, the genius creating wealth alone.
The author argues the capitalist does not build alone, but instead builds, how did they put it?
On stolen land, with coerced labor, through supply chains that exploit the unseen and unheard, those you call lazy, incompetent, undeserving.
Yeah. And the conclusion is stark. What you call production is, quote, too often extraction.
It completely reframes that narrative, doesn't it? It shifts the focus.
It really does. From individual achievement to, well, the potential costs and inputs hidden beneath it.
Absolutely. It highlights these sort of hidden subsidies, the resources, the labor that might underpin wealth creation but aren't always acknowledged. And this ties into another major point the author makes about reason.
Ah, yes, the idea that reason is used as a weapon.
Or maybe not even reason, but rationalization. That's the word the author uses. Rationalization for a system that, in their view, punishes care, erases community, and rewards those most ruthless at playing a game designed in their image.
So it's not just a philosophical difference, it's a moral charge against the system itself.
Precisely. It's questioning the fundamental ethics embedded within it.
And this leads directly into challenging that Randian claim that money doesn't compete with guns. How does the author tackle that?
By pointing to real-world examples, they say basically, tell that to the people of Iraq, of Libya, of Vietnam, implying that historically currency and military force have been deeply intertwined, often in conflict.
And they don't stop there, do they? They bring up modern examples too.
Right. They say, tell it to the miners in Congo whose lithium fuels your phone, but who are paid in the debt of generations.
It makes it very immediate, very visceral, not just abstract theory.
And that idea that human beings themselves can become tools within this system is really pushed hard. The author asks these incredibly pointed questions like, what is a sweatshop if not a human being turned into a tool?
Oof.
Yeah. And what is wage slavery but consent manufactured under threat of hunger?
It really forces you to confront the human cost, the often hidden cost of labor in the global economy.
It challenges that notion of purely free exchange when basic survival is on the line.
So, okay, after dissecting the origins, the costs, the human element, where does the author land on the idea of worshiping money itself?
They're pretty unequivocal. They state, addressing Rand's character, no, Francisco, I run from anyone who worships it.
Why? What's the reasoning?
Because, they argue, in this world, your world, meaning the world Rand describes, and arguably the one we live in, money is not neutral, it is not noble, and crucially, it is not earned by the best among us. Instead, the author claims, it is hoarded by those who were born close enough to the fire to stay warm, and who then turned around and called it merit.
That's a powerful condemnation of essentially inherited advantage being disguised as deserved success.
Exactly, and this leads to what the author presents as a fundamental paradox. Rand argues, virtue creates wealth, but the author flips it, arguing that in this system, wealth erases the need for virtue entirely.
How so? Wealth erases the need for virtue.
Well, the implication is that once you have enough wealth and power, Moral considerations can become secondary or even irrelevant to maintaining that position within the system.
Can you give that stark example they used? It was quite chilling.
Yeah, it really was. The hedge fund manager who shortens lifespans with insulin prices will die a hero to your market, while the teacher who starves in retirement will die forgotten.
Wow. It's a thought experiment, but it really hits home about how we measure value, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And so, from this perspective, Rand's famous speech isn't seen as timeless wisdom at all.
No. The author positions it as a relic. More than that, a gospel of scarcity preached to the privileged.
An old script, essentially, for a world that's rapidly moving on.
And the author emphasizes that the world is changing, right? That the old order is being challenged.
Definitely. They point to concrete examples happening now. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, creating economic alternatives. Nations starting to demand their gold reserves back. Signs that fiat currencies, money backed only by government decree, might be facing serious challenges globally.
And the author claims the moral force is shifting.
Yes, they assert that the moral force you once claimed for capitalism now belongs to those who reject it, not out of envy, but out of survival. And there's this observation about America's current global posture.
What was that again?
The source describes America as behaving more and more like a cornered animal, hoarding, threatening, retreating into bunkers and hedge funds, clutching at the myth of meritocracy. That's the author's take, of course.
And they tie Rand's core principle, the virtue of selfishness, directly to negative real-world outcomes.
Oh, absolutely. They list things like ecological collapse, pandemic profiteering, privatized everything, and billionaires launching vanity rockets while the ocean swallows coastlines and children go hungry in the shadow of 10,000 Whole Foods.
It's a pretty direct linking of that philosophy to, well, a lot of modern crises.
And there's this brilliant, sharp critique of Rand's Gulch idea, the hidden utopia where the producers retreat. The author says it's become a parody in real time.
A parody? How?
They paint this picture of Silicon Valley oligarchs displacing indigenous people to build bunkered crypto compounds in Patagonia and the Andes, still pretending they are creating civilization, not fleeing its consequences. It's a very cutting image of that escapist fantasy playing out, arguably destructively.
Okay, so that's the critique, a really deep and wide-ranging one. What about the alternative? What does the author want instead?
Well, it's a vision that goes way beyond just a different kind of money. They talk about wanting food grown in community, not branded by conglomerates. I want gold that stays in Africa. I want children who don't have to choose between water and school.
So, basic human needs and dignity.
Exactly. I want dignity, not credit. Value, not price. Relationship, not transaction. And the core idea seems to be value that comes from care, not from coins.
It's a fundamental shift in what prosperity even means, moving away from just financial accumulation.
It really is. It's shifting from, say, a transactional way of measuring worth to a relational one, valuing human connection, ecological health, basic rights maybe over just stockpiling capital. It's imagining prosperity built on, collective well-being, not just individual gain.
So wrapping this up, the core conflict we've explored through this essay is pretty profound. It's this tension between the worship of money, on one hand,
and the pursuit of these deeper human values on the other community. Dignity, care, relationship.
And the author leaves us with a really provocative, almost unsettling suggestion towards the end.
Yeah, that question about fear. Perhaps the root of your money is fear.
What kind of fear?
The fear that without capital, you'd have to face the fact that you were never worth what you were paid. That's a really challenging thought.
It is. But the author's final statement is quite powerful, quite resolute. I don't believe money is the root of all evil, they say.
But I do believe that unquestioned money raised as God, as virtue, as proof of worth, will take everything from us if we let it.
And I will not let it. Not quietly. We were meant for more than this.
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it?
It does. Maybe the question for all of us is, what truly stands out to you about how we measure value, real value, in the world today?